We'll see. It's been a long day today, Giants, but a good one. Right, and reread some parts of that book I was telling you about yesterday on the episode.
You use a Kindle?
No, I got the paper. Now that I'm back and I'm settled for a while, Jared, it's all paper books, baby.
So how do you make notes of spots to go back to?
I just try to remember where I read it. I should just put a sticky, but I try to remember. I'm not so sure about that. I just get into my books, Jared. Hello and welcome to the Untranslatable Podcast. We are here recording episode 237, and today we are talking about counterculture. So we're going to be talking about what is counterculture, some different examples of counterculture, not only within the U.S., but in other places. But it does tend to manifest itself, I would say, in similar ways. We all, regardless of our creed, nationality, culture, I feel like we all, as humans, express ourselves in certain ways and rebel against the mainstream in similar ways as well. So we'll be talking about some of those ways today. And who knows, maybe by the end of the episode, you might be a hippie yourself. Who knows? I got my tie-dye tank top on for all of our listeners out there on YouTube, I guess viewers on YouTube. If you're not, we thank you for checking us out on Spotify and Stitcher and all the other great stuff out there. But, this podcast would be nowhere where it's at without my partner in crime trying to start our own untranslatable counterculture. My good buddy, Jared. What's going on, Jared?
Mm-hmm. Get into the Untranslatable Podcast while you can. Be one of the people that can say, oh, I knew them before they were famous. Because we will sell out, by the way, when the time comes.
Pepsi, Coke, whoever gives us the better offer quicker,
Yeah.
I'm more of a Phantom man myself, but hey, that's neither here nor there.
Gillette, the best razors in the business.
And I'm sitting here with like a super long beard or something.
Yeah, are you going to have it's going to be like at the end of a Formula 1 race, they put on their hat, that obviously has and then they all of them get handed like a tens of thousands of dollar wristwatch that they always just wear around.
Right.
Like that's just the first thing they put on after the race. It's like, hey, the sponsors are looking, put it on.
That's true.
And I always, every time I look at it, I'm like, I bet you the time is never right on those watches.
Probably. I bet you they don't even work. I bet you there's like not even a battery.
They're just props.
Yeah, they're just. It's probably not even a real one. It's probably just.
The real one costs $35,000, but the one on their wrist, that's actually just like a hollow case.
just for the.
That's just like $200.
Right. It costs us $22.50, so we decided to go with that.
If you look closely, there's not even any hands on it. So
right. All you can see is our logo in really big letters, just so you know it's our watch.
I mean, that probably might be smart because I can't imagine they're ever like, what time is it?
Right.
Looking at their.
I have to say, I wish our wonderful congressmen and congresswomen would wear their sponsors on their suits when they gave speeches. Because
what if their suits look like a soccer jersey or something like that?
It'll look like a NASCAR. It'll look like a NASCAR thing. Yeah, they'll just have patches everywhere. NRA and.
Yeah, I mean,
Westboro
it would probably
Baptist
have to
Church.
be. It wouldn't even all fit on what they're wearing. To be honest with you, it would have to be on some sort of. They would be on their jet. Their jet would be covered.
It's okay. We'll give them a hat. They can wear a hat. They can wear a scarf if they need some extra.
As soon as they walk into into the Capitol, they are wearing their suits and they put on a baseball cap.
Right.
And it just says
sitting on their desk
on it.
Right.
And my chief sponsor,
a couple pharmaceutical
BP.
companies.
Yeah, Pfizer, my chief sponsor.
Yeah. Oh man.
I would like to thank you for the flight out here. So please, by the way, spread a little love. Follow us on Instagram, Untranslatable Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Untranslatable 1, the number 1. You can follow us on those two places that I just said. You can also. You please give us 5-star reviews on iTunes, Stitcher. That would be great. Also, just announced we have a multi-million dollar deal with Spotify in the works, so pray for us on that. So we were talking before we started, not recording, but before we started officially doing this pod about the shutdown and all this stuff, and how it just seems like it's endless. And different places in the world, different countries seem to have it under control more than others, and so
you could say that.
And I think to say that, I think Americans get a bad rap, but I bet you people in other countries out there are a lot of restless people out there that are like this is ridiculous in various other countries too. Have you heard though that this is a perfect confluence of two groups struggling right now? The man or woman who has to the person, excuse me, I shouldn't say that at all. The person that is trapped at home, the humanoid that is trapped at home,
the sentient being
that is trapped at home during this pandemic is getting is this is not healthy for one's mental health. And then there's also the airline industries who are just hemorrhaging money hand over fist because no one is going anywhere for the most part, even though people are traveling occasionally. It's not like you can't travel, but you can't go far. And we are lucky here in the U.S. We have access to so much here in the U.S. as far as landscape and travel opportunities, where I don't think we even realize how lucky we might have it in comparison to people in other countries, like in Europe or something like that are so used to just hopping from country to country. Qantas, I believe, yes, has a idea for this, and I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think of this as a business idea for the airlines? Finally, okay. Well, I'll be fair.
You're already starting to laugh. This is
well, I was gonna say this article is a little skewed, so
okay,
you're gonna know the article's feelings of it pretty quickly.
Okay.
Finally, a form of leisure travel. This is from Jalopnik, a car publication that I like to read. Finally, a form of, or I guess transportation, I should say. Finally, a form of leisure travel more detestable and tedious than cruise ships. Some airlines are so desperate to retake the skies that they are now offering sightseeing trips that begin and end at the same airport. It's a horrifyingly wasteful practice, and with tickets proving extremely popular with jet-setting customers tired of being grounded by COVID-19, it's possibly not a passing fad. From the USA Today, Australian carrier Qantas Airways has offered a flight billed as the Great Southern Land Scenic Flight that both takes off from and lands in Sydney. Qantas is Australia's big international airline, which, if I'm not mistaken, has pretty nice first class if you get on with some of those big planes. I think they're known for having one of the nicer ones. Taiwan-based EVA Air flew Hello Kitty-themed flights round trip from and to Taipei in August. The Bangkok Post reports Japan's ANA offered a brief sightseeing flight from Tokyo in August on the planes it normally uses on the Honolulu run. The airline, that's crazy. I imagine the plane they use on the Honolulu run is much bigger than anything that's needed to get anywhere in Japan on a plane.
Probably, right.
It's not that big of a place. Singapore Airlines is weighing whether to give the concept a go. Singapore Airlines is considering several initiatives that would allow us to continue engaging both our customers and members of the public. Currently, none of these plans have been firmed up, says spokesman James Boyd. Chad, how do you feel about a sightseeing flight? From point A to point A, sightseeing flight. You don't get off the plane. Well, you get off the plane in the same place you took off and go back home.
Well, I think it's very wasteful in terms of like all the fuel. Well, I don't know how much fuel do they go through.
Let's. Well, I don't know how much fuel they go through, but let me tell you how much they cost. By the way.
Okay. Sure.
With ticket prices for the Qantas one. Let me just, okay. I'm just so overwhelmed by all this great information. Jalopnik. Yes, a Hawaiian resort experience in an airport. That honestly sounds terrible and nowhere close to as good as actually getting to be in Hawaii.
That is hilarious.
I used to fly 4 or 5 times a year and have never enjoyed anything about the airport except leaving it. I agree.
Yep.
As soon as I get into the airport, I'm
Yep.
like, how quickly until I get out of an airplane and an airport? Like, this is just a means to an end.
Airports are weird places, man. They're just
Yeah.
they're weird.
You're
Anything
trapped
goes.
in that little in the terminal.
Right.
Everything food is okay, and unless in rare other than rare examples, and then it's like expensive, and it's just like I don't know, I don't like it. That's why I'm always trying to cut my timing as close as possible because I hate being there. Qantas Airlines 7-hour flight to nowhere sold out of its 134 window seats in 10 minutes.
Wow.
With ticket prices ranging from $566 to $2,734. 7 hours. A 7-hour flight already sounds like a pain in the ass when heading somewhere fun and enjoyable, let alone going right back to the same airport. That is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous on so many levels. I could never
Especially Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I could just never justify being on a plane for 7 hours to land in the same place.
I know.
But who knows, man? Maybe we're being closed-minded. Maybe they got some great views, got some great pics for the gram, I betcha.
I can't imagine the best views come from an airplane. I'm going to be honest with you.
I mean, probably
it's not a great angle.
Right.
The slowest a plane could probably go is 300 miles per hour.
Right. Right.
Like it's not really the most it's not really the best. And maybe it's cool to see stuff see from above. But for 7 hours, what?
Yeah.
So for 7 hours, you're just when your eyes are peeled on the at the window. Or you pay $2,734, which I imagine is first class. So you get a slightly better shitty meal.
Right.
You could buy. No matter where you are, I imagine you can find a much better meal than you can find on just about every airplane this side of a private jet. You know.
Right. Well, I can just think of so many better things I could spend that money on than.
And that's the thing. And this is you could rent a car for $566 to $2,734 and go in and go within the same place, within the same area, and actually have experiences. Mm-hmm. It's I don't understand the appeal, and I don't understand why anyone would enjoy even going to the airport. You still obviously have to go through security. You still obviously have to. Oh my gosh! You still have to check in. It's so much effort.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's my gosh,
absolutely crazy.
So not for you.
Nope. That's a big fat no for me, buddy, on that one. That is for sure. It's so ridiculous, and especially that price. I mean, it really to me makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
No sense at all.
And it is interesting to me. It's like, do the airlines have no shame? I guess the answer is no. So whatever we can do to make money, even if it's just
exactly.
Because I just imagine the people in whatever department it is that figures this stuff out. It's just how can we just find any way to get people on this plane? You know,
Right.
It's forget the environment, forget whether if people need this or anything.
We need to make money.
Yeah, we're here to make money.
Yep.
So we better find a way to get people on this plane.
Exactly.
It's oh my gosh.
In a year or two, if things don't improve, you're gonna start seeing karaoke bars turned airplane rides or some shit.
Well, the airline industries really do have no morals because they were also the ones. At least there were all the stories earlier on in this thing about how they were. What was it? Oh, they were doing those ghost flights because in order to keep certain routes in good times, like the big airlines, you have to pay a lot for this. But also, if you don't fly the routes a certain amount of time in your the year or whatever that they do the bidding for these routes, then you lose them. So there's well, we can't lose these routes. These are so we're just going to fly empty planes or damn near empty planes just so we can keep this.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know. I feel like the airline industry has really been exposing themselves recently. I mean, we still haven't really fully gotten past the Boeing incident with the 737s or whatever it was, 737 Maxes.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I think this whole thing has exposed a lot of different businesses and people and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
But-
I'm really behind your sponsorship, political sponsorship idea where they need to wear their sponsorships like a NASCAR driver.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
I love that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, dude, that is for sure. Well, instead of talking about some politicians, how about we
Spread a little love. I love how you say instead of talking about politicians, because you're like, there's a very small chance that we're going to be spreading love to politicians. Let's be honest.
Yep.
Although you
Probably
have
not.
before, you have before, to be fair.
Maybe not. But my first
Chad-
first shout out today,
Will neither confirm
Jared,
nor deny.
That's right. No comment. The Untranslatable podcast has no comment on the matter. Anyways, this is fantastic, though, Jared. Shout out to my, I guess, my last place that I called home, which was China. They have pledged to be carbon neutral by 2060, which is great because, well, number one, China is the world's biggest source of CO2 emissions. And they have set a date for carbon neutrality, 2060, which honestly, as big as China is and as much as it's still developing, I think 2060 is probably a realistic goal, to be honest. Just because, like, I don't know, you just see all the factories and everything else over there, and that stuff cannot just be turned into green energy and solar and all these other types of renewable energy overnight. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of coordination. But I think this is awesome that they have, set a date, and hopefully we'll figure out at some point what the plans will be and how they'll do that. Because I'm really curious to see how they'll do that. But I think that's great. So.
What do you mean? I'm curious to see how they'll do it because of how aggressively they're known for, like, in like growing in like building up and industrialization.
Yes,
like they're very known for fast growth, and I'm just interested to see how they balance that, because I don't think I can't imagine that their plan is to slow that down. It's like, but how can we? I guess how can we do it in a cleaner way?
Exactly. And to be honest with you, I have to say I was so impressed by just the amount of ingenuity there is in China. The way people are really good over there at making do, and even making, I don't know how this won't make sense, but they go above and beyond just making do with what they have. A lot of people, I mean, they're so ingenuitive, and I think that they will definitely be able to hopefully find a way to do that. So I think that's great. My second shout out, this is kind of a crazy story, Jared. The headline is sniffer dogs found to detect COVID-19. So according to a study,
I saw that on Twitter. I saw like a headline.
Yeah. So according to a study deployed, I don't know if it was the University of Helsinki. Yes, the University of Helsinki. There were dogs that have shown to be able to identify the virus within 10 seconds. And the dogs had
That's
almost
faster than like the rapid COVID test that the White House is using.
Right. And what's also interesting is apparently so far in the study, the dogs have actually had 100% accuracy.
All right,
sometimes
listen,
Chad, isn't this crazy?
I don't know if you've been talking to my partner or something, but fine, we'll get a dog.
You got to call Finland so it can smell COVID, so you can make sure you
give
don't
me one of those
anybody...
COVID sniffing dogs.
Right. Can you imagine, dude? Can you imagine people could make a pretty penny for one of those things if they try to advertise that?
I mean, I could you imagine one of those at the airport? One of those COVID dogs barking at you at the airport in like 5 years.
You just got like a Slim Jim or like beef jerky in your pocket, and that's why it's barking at you. Like there was like that really funny like headline, and it later became a meme of this like cute little like Cocker Spaniel or Springer Spaniel dog that they had as a bomb sniffing dog in England, and the headline read something along the lines of bomb sniffing dog good at sniffing out sausages, not sausages instead of bombs. And so it turns out he was finding people's the food and snacks they had in their suitcases, and not
No, listen, I very rarely travel with explosive devices or firearms, but I get
Be careful saying that.
I get so uncomfortable around those dogs. I'm like, oh God, do I have some explosives that I didn't know about?
Well, there's also that really funny meme. I think I might have even seen it on Twitter of the police officer, and he has his drug dog, and this guy I think sent a Snapchat and it says like, I got like 2 ounces on me, I hope this dog doesn't snitch. And then someone made a fake Twitter account with a picture of the dog and it was like, don't worry, I ain't no snitch or something like that.
I saw that.
It was really funny.
Saw that. That was like a couple months ago or something.
Yep. But yeah, anyways, that's a crazy story. Shout out to, I wonder who had that idea. Like who was like, I wonder if because dogs can sniff out all sorts of other illnesses and stuff. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, the idea doesn't seem far-fetched to me because of that. Like, don't they have like cancer sniffing dogs and stuff like that?
Well,
I think the more the thing to me is how were you able to get to capture the smell of COVID? You know, like
Well,
how are you able to make that identifiable?
Well, I think I would be willing to bet you this is just my crazy far-fetched guess. And to all our listeners out here, I am by no means a scientist. This is not a fact. This is just a crazy
they had
idea.
like a sick person cough in a dog's face.
I think that's so terrible, Jared. No, what I think it is that because I remember when my parents took their dog to get trained, and my mom did the training with her. The dog trainer said if your dog starts like smelling you like more than normal or starts like pushing their nose into like a certain part of your body, go to the doctor. Yeah, go to the doctor. Because I bet you what it could be is maybe there is some type of scent, or I wonder if it has something to do with your blood
sound.
Maybe your sound, or I don't know. Somehow I think like also maybe your blood circulation or your heartbeat. I don't know, but a dog's sense of hearing and smell is so much better than ours.
Right.
It's hard to say. I mean, who knows what their sensory, what they can pick up. But anyways, this is really crazy, pretty crazy stuff. So
yeah,
shout out
bears
to
also have really good hearing and smell. I wonder if we could somehow use them for good.
Oh, we'll have to make a on the road again to Russia to find out.
There's one on a leash sniffing you.
Exactly.
That's definitely a great deterrent not to travel with
anything
explosives.
Bad. Right.
We take care of this right away if we find any sort of problem.
Exactly. Don't mess around with the bear, Jared. Yeah, I think you might know what time it is, Jared.
Do you hear that? Oh, yeah, I hear it.
Oh, I hear it as well. It's time for the untranslatables, which are idioms, proverbs, axioms, sayings, phrases that don't translate on a one-to-one basis into English. And I have 3. I believe the language is pronounced Khmer, which is spoken in, do you know, Jared?
Cambodia?
Very good. Very, very good. You probably already know these untranslatables already. So the first one for you is, I believe it's pronounced Sabak Chong, which means leg skins. What are leg skins, Jared?
Pants?
Close.
Underwear?
Go a little further down.
Socks?
You're
Boots,
getting really
shoes.
warm. There we go. Shoes.
Leg skins? I guess
shoes.
so.
Well,
but I guess
wonder.
In my mind, I'm like, skin is leg skin.
Well, right. Well, the thing is that I wonder if, some languages, and I don't know this about Khmer, but some languages, when they say leg, that includes the foot.
Okay.
So I wonder if maybe that's why.
Us here in the United States, we separate our legs from our feet.
Right. Even though
some people are like, that's all just one thing.
Right, because it is technically all one thing.
Sure, but I guess you could say that about your whole body. It's all one thing. I would hope.
It is. Very good, Jared. Should we talk about the 7 chakras while we're at it too? Or sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes?
Oh. The 4th hole. I always like to joke about the 4th hole. You've seen that Family Guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, my first untranslatable is French, and it's chercher la petite bête.
Something about a little something.
Yeah. Look for the little beast.
Is this sexual?
No.
No,
it's not
okay.
sexual.
It's not sexual. Okay. Got to double check sometimes. Okay. What was it again? Something about the little beast?
To look for the little beast. Chercher la petite bête.
That sounded good right there. That
Thank
might
you.
have to be a drop. Seriously, that sounds really good.
I mean, it is usable, probably.
Right. Okay.
Let's
Give me a clue here, Jared. Give me a clue.
Okay, I don't even know if I'm trying to think if I even know. So first of all, there's a clear untranslatable that we have in the United States.
Okay.
And probably in other English speaking places.
Does it have an animal?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm trying to wonder if I even fully know what it means. It's funny too, because I know the untranslatable. I'm like, but how would you use it? I will say that. So to look for the little beast is so let's see. Okay. So you're telling me a story. You're like, dude, oh my gosh, I was on the freeway.
Oh, get to the point.
No.
Okay.
And this guy, he in this pickup truck, he cut me off and he started giving me the finger, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what kind of pickup truck was it?
What a jerk. Okay.
And you're like, I don't know, like a F-150 or something. I'm like, oh my man, that's crazy. What color was it? And you're like, red. And you're like, but it was like a maroon or more like a bright red. And you're like, who cares? I don't know. And I'm like, and you're like, I don't know, burgundy. That's perfect. You're like burgundy, and I was like, yeah, but with like a light burgundy. Like, would you call that like a more mahogany burgundy, maybe a darker side? And you're like, bro, you're really looking for the little beast here. Who cares?
So you're like trying to get to the finest detail.
We have our untranslatable in the U.S. In English has to do with hair. If you don't cut your hair for a long time, this happens to the end of your hair.
Dead ends?
Yeah, what happens?
Split ends?
There you go, yeah. Anyway, it's to split hairs.
To split hairs. Oh, okay.
Is that what splitting hairs would be? Did I explain that right?
I think so.
Okay,
that makes sense to me.
Like you're worried too much about the details, essentially?
Right. Yeah, you're splitting hairs. Yeah, you're just looking at... I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a weird one, and honestly, Jared, I hate to say this, but I wish you luck. This is my last two
Challenge
are also
accepted.
Khmer, and this one is Tuk Krok Kma, which literally translates to orange juice cat. I'll tell you, this is a fruit.
Oh, a jackfruit.
Nope.
A pomegranate.
Nope.
See, now I'm just guessing fruit.
Nope.
Orange juice cat. And it's a fruit?
What fruits look kind of like an orange and might be shaped like a cat's eye?
A clementine, a tangerine, a lime.
There we go.
It's a lime?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't... Okay, sure. Yeah, you're right. You were right to wish me luck.
Yeah, I told you that one's a tricky one.
Is that like the official word for lime?
According to the website I found this at, yeah.
Okay. So, I'll take their word for it.
Any listeners in Cambodia, let us know on translatablepodcast@gmail.com. We don't want to be spreading disinformation and misinformation about your language, that's for sure.
My next and last untranslatable is Norwegian. And it's, do you know what the little circles over A's in Norwegian, how would you pronounce that?
No idea.
Fa.
No idea. Great question.
Okay, well, most of the A's except for one of them have that little circle over it.
Nice. Just go with your gut, Jared. You can do it.
Blood pa danen. Now, one word you should know just from
tree, pine tree.
Afa blood pa tanen.
Oh, pair? Couple?
No, the blood is blood. That's the word.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, let me hear this. Let me see if I can figure out how you'd actually... Let's
actually say
this.
The O's. Let's hear. Oh, wow.
It's like O.
Oh, it's like an O. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like a darker A, I guess. Like an
okay.
A-O,
yeah, it is. It's an O.
Uh-huh. Oh.
O for blood potanen. Overblod potanen. I'm glad I looked that up.
Which means?
To get blood on your teeth.
To get is that like to like work really hard, like to
Wow.
Your boy's
become
gotten blood on
inspired
his
or
teeth
driven
before.
to do something.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes getting to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
That was
getting
very
blood
good.
on
That's
the
very
teeth.
good. That was not obvious to me, but when I hear it, it makes sense.
It makes sense. I like
Yeah.
that one. That one's
It's
badass,
like almost kind of
dude.
like to get your hands dirty, like
Yeah.
is what we would say here.
That, for some reason, and I know that I don't think were the Danes Vikings as well.
I think so.
I think so too.
Maybe not Vikings specifically, but they had some sort of
Right. Because that just sounds like a badass thing a Viking would say, you know? oh, Fjord, you have blood on your teeth. I don't know if that's how Viking talks, but you know.
Yeah, that was. He sounded like I don't know, Irish or something or Scottish. I don't even know what that was.
All right, I got one more for you, Jared, and then we can get into our counterculture topic today.
You betcha.
Because I think this one, in some ways, may slightly relate to some aspects of counterculture, and this is Wulmuk, and Wulmuk means spinning face.
Spinning face. Is that like to be two-faced? Or to be like a double, not double-sided, but like a shifty?
Think about if you feel like your face is spinning or your head is spinning. How would you describe that feeling?
Disorienting?
Or if you spin around a lot, you spin your face around a lot.
Dizzy?
There we go.
Oh, it means to be dizzy to have a spinning face.
Spinning face.
So it's actually more literal than I was thinking. That's
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a good one.
What does that have to do with counterculture? Where are you going with that?
I feel like in counterculture you have some wild music that might be running around like crazy.
Music.
You might be disoriented because in a lot of counterculture they do enjoy their fair share of different substances.
That's
for
true.
example, you know. So, but let's get into it. Let's talk about counterculture today.
What does counterculture mean to you? I see your background. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see Chad's
psychedelic
the U.S. Capitol. That's sort of psychedelic out. It's almost like and it's sort of darkened out, and there are a lot of shapes and stuff around it. It's almost like I don't know. It gives me vibes of someone on some sort of hallucinogen talking about the Illuminati or something. I see a lot of triangles.
Well, I mean, that's where we're going by the end of the episode, Jared. So hold on tight.
Yeah,
everybody.
we didn't mention that we did take some psychedelics right before this started. They should be kicking in right about now as we get into the main topic.
we planned it. We had a timer set and everything. Anyways, so counterculture. I would just say counterculture is any type of movement or reaction against the mainstream, and the mainstream could be anything from the mainstream government, the mainstream media, mainstream music, mainstream anything, mainstream film, anything that's kind of your cookie cutter.
Mainstream, like society, I also think like family style.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Maybe.
The nuclear family. You know, yeah, definitely. I mean, counterculture movements. I also think of like cults as a part of a counterculture movement sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of cults.
Definitely art. A lot of art.
Art for sure. Music is a big one too.
Now, I believe I watched some movie. Maybe this was with my partner. Maybe I don't. But have you heard of? There was this movie that I told you about it when I watched it because I watched it during this podcast at some point. Now that I remember, now that I think about it, it was about a artist that was struggling to be true to himself. It was a German movie, and
I think we
don't
talked
remember where
about
I watched this. Did I watch this in a movie theater or something? Is this when I went to the German movie theater? Is this what I watched?
I
don't remember.
Could
Well,
be.
I didn't go to a German movie theater, but I went to like a foreign movie theater, and I remember I were in Philly watching it. Anyway, it was about how he was in Germany, and he was in like Cologne or Dusseldorf or Cologne or something, which were known for being very countercultural at the time artistically. But he was a very traditional painter of, and people weren't really interested in his traditional paintings, but he had to stay true to himself, and it's about. In spite of counterculture, staying true to yourself, essentially. He was essentially the counterculture by being, quote unquote, traditional, you know? Because when everyone's counterculture, no one's counterculture.
That's true. That's a crazy idea, isn't it? When counterculture, that's I feel like also very incredibly meta, but like when counterculture becomes so, if everything's
I feel like
counterculture, nothing is counterculture.
I feel like that's also a big challenge for artists too, because we all have artists too, where it's like, oh, I knew them when they were not famous, or I knew them when, like especially I know a bunch of rappers that I'm like, oh yeah, I much prefer like Wale. I used to love Wale's mixtapes, and I always have to stop myself from being like, oh yeah, I liked him before he was signed to a label and making
Don't wanna be
music
that guy.
for a company. Like you can hear the difference,
Right.
And it's so weird where it's like, well, obviously. You should be, if you're a fan of this person, you should be happy for their success and to see them getting more popular. But it's like, oh no, their music's not the same anymore now that they're making music for a company. Essentially, is what you're doing when you're signed to a music label.
Yeah, the role is very different. For sure. But counterculture. I think what's so fascinating about counterculture is that at least as Americans, I think we associate it a lot with the 60s and the 70s and the hippie movement. Because I think that was one of the first, which is kind of like Jared's favorite phrase, piggybacking on what Jared said. The hippie movement, I think, was the reason why we associate counterculture with it is, I think there are two main reasons. Number one, it was during the boomer generation, their like time in college, and they're like 20s and I think teens to maybe even late 20s. And those are our parents, a lot of us at least the millennials do it, talking. And the thing is that I think the hippies at the time, were, I think a lot of people really looked down on them and thought negatively. But a lot of
they got like those, like they had a bunch of negative stereotypes of being like lazy
and smelly
bums and not productive and
but the funny thing is that I feel like that era and that generation produced some of the top music. I mean, music back then was fantastic, and so I think because of the music, I think it brought hippie culture as a counterculture to a more mainstream type of culture, to the point where I would even argue that hippies nowadays might not even be really that counterculture. I think it's just broken off into different kind of countercultures. I
mean, hippie is now like what we call is essentially like a hipster, but a hipster is just someone that wears glasses and they don't have prescriptions.
Right.
And wears
only
a lot
drinks
of
Pabst
thrift store
Blue
clothes.
Ribbon because it's cool to drink that, or because it's not cool
to
to
a bunch
drink.
of like underground music that no one, you've never heard of them, but they're better than blah blah blah.
Exactly.
I think another big part of counterculture popularity in that time in the U.S. had a lot to do with like it being the height of the civil rights movement too.
I agree.
And so I think that was probably, I imagine, now obviously I wasn't around them, but I imagine that is probably around the beginning where it started to be more acceptable to like speak out against some of the like oppressive laws and stuff like that. And I think it became popular, almost like it's popular now for a celebrity to be like, black and white there, and be like, I am part of the problem. I need to be held accountable, and everyone's rolling their eyes. I think that feels like it was kind of that was kind of what was going on in the 60s too. Just they couldn't put out selfie videos of them practicing, and I imagine some of those actors must have sent those off as an audition tape and be like, this is some of my top work recently.
Right. That wouldn't surprise me.
I work well remotely. But yeah, I think that the civil rights movement had a lot to do with that, and people, and it has to, and once again, because that has to do with the civil rights movement has to do with fighting against quote unquote the man, the establishment being the government, being the white people as a whole,
status quo.
The status quo of what's normal, of
societal norm values. Your hair needs to look a certain way, you dress a certain way.
Isn't that also when during the Olympics they did the fist thing too around that time? Wasn't that around there?
I think so.
What's his name? Jesse Williams?
I think so. Sounds right. Yeah, when they won the Olympics was it track?
1968, yeah.
Uh-huh.
in Mexico City. It was Tommy Smith and John Carlos. So yeah, it was just it was a very popular time for these political movements. I mean not political movements. I mean these.
Well, no, that was a political movement.
Well, sure, but I meant more to say like these. Civil rights movements is what I meant to say. But yeah, it's clearly, it's a civil rights movement asking for a change in policy. So it is obviously a political movement as well. But I mean, even this, like I'm looking at the picture now, even this movement, the symbol of the fist is still, something that's very commonly used today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, but I think the good thing about a lot of these counterculture movements is it has brought some better things, I think, into the mainstream. The point of counterculture is to talk about things, I think, that the mainstream does not talk about, because either it's too difficult, it's too harsh. If you're talking about the mass media, it doesn't fit into their narrative, it doesn't get enough clicks, it doesn't get enough views, whatever it may be, right? So I think that's what's also, you mentioned, art and music, which I think is a big, and as I mentioned when we started this episode, I think many different cultures express counterculture in very similar ways, through music, through art, especially through like street art, street performances, street music.
Yeah.
Because
when you say that, I think Berlin just immediately.
Yes. Actually, let's think of some places. Let's just do like a quick little counterculture. So for you, a place you think of for counterculture is Berlin. Right?
Yeah, a lot of graffiti all over the place. The art, like it has a very specific style. Is the word we were using a lot during the week was aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I also think of Brooklyn and the Bronx when it comes to hip hop, because I feel like hip hop at in its early stages, it was a part of counterculture. It wasn't a mainstream thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think hip hop was a big counter. I think a lot of music, really punk music, is very counterculture. Metal music, big time. One of my favorite metal bands, Lamb of God, I feel like they have a lot of music that is very kind of critical about the system and a lot of stuff like that. So
a lot of conservatives have been mad recently about Rage Against the Machine, talking about how Donald Trump is a terrible person. Where it's like, did you not even hear the title of their band?
Right. What machine do you think they're raging against? What? The vacuum machine, the washing machine?
Yeah, vacuum.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, the funny thing is too is that I saw someone try to pull the whole, oh, you're a musician, why are you sharing your political opinion kind of thing. And they tried to pull that with Tom Morello, the guitar player from Rage Against the Machine. And ironically, well, not ironically, but it just so happens that Tom Morello studied political science at Harvard. I think he might know what he's talking about.
Sticking to what I know. Yeah.
Right. And so
they're always like, stick to what you know, where it's like, I have a degree on it, so I guess technically I could say I know it.
Well, his response on either Instagram or Twitter, wherever it was just a slam dunk. He was like, you don't need a blah, 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 blah in political science from Harvard to see this, but just so happens I do.
Well, and that's such a classic tactic used by people on the internet to silence anyone that says anything that they don't like. Is stick to sports, stick to cars, stick to music, whatever it is that your thing is. Or it's like, don't veer off of, don't have any sort of real opinion. You're just an actor. How could you, like, why should we listen to your opinion?
Right.
Or it's like, first of all, you don't have to. Just
exactly. Turn off the TV.
They're allowed to say whatever they They're allowed to say whatever they want.
That's the beauty of free speech. What?
You want to hear the complete opposite of counterculture?
Sure.
Did you hear about The Rock today? This was today, I believe.
No, what happened?
He put out a 7-minute video supporting Biden Harris, and he and I think he interviewed them. I didn't watch the whole thing because I almost threw up in my mouth. But it's just so funny. It's just so weird to see. And then of course, I didn't even really wasn't even interested in the video. You know what I was interested in, of course, is the comments.
Sure, of course, of course.
And this one guy was like, "Oh, come on, man! I thought better of you." The Rundown was one of my favorite movies, but not anymore. And I was like, first of all, you chose a shitty movie to be
right.
The
out of
Rundown
all the Rock
was one of your
movies out
favorite
there,
movies,
right? Oh man,
That's not a good movie, dude. I mean, it's a fine movie, but it's like yeah, that's high art from The Rock right there.
right. Oh man,
Fast 8 was my favorite, bro. Not anymore.
I'm gonna boycott all Rock movies. I'm gonna burn my WWE flag in my parents' basement.
Oh my gosh. I do not smell what The Rock is cooking. The Rock is cooking some bullshit. No. But I mean, that shows you how serious this thing, even The Rock is like, oh God,
Right.
I got to say something. because these people are about to vote Trump in again.
Right.
But anyway, that's the opposite of counterculture. The
Right.
Rock endorsing Biden Harris is not counterculture.
You know what's funny though is I think the beginning of Trump did kind of start as a counterculture
Yes.
thing. 100%.
He's telling it like it is. He's
Right.
not
That was
one of these
the
politicians.
tropes you heard all the time. Yeah, he tells it like
Yeah,
it is.
he's
He's honest. He speaks his
Yeah.
mind, is what they say. You know.
Yeah, and they're saying we need someone to get us out of the habit of just selecting these robotic politicians.
But can I just say this? And I am in no way defending Trump at all. But I will say this: I have heard, like, when you hear leaked clips of him talking to people behind closed doors, he sounds a hell of a lot more intelligent and coherent than he does during his speeches and all that other crap. And I wonder, I have my own little theory here, Jared, that I wonder if that has to do with he has this certain persona he plays to his base and he knows it works,
Right.
and so that's why he does it. I honestly, I mean, don't think he's as stupid as people think he is.
Yeah, I don't think it's helpful to just discount him fully. I think that's fair. I think we're not, like, people aren't doing themselves any service, like, but I don't think he's as planned. Like, I don't think he's planned. Like, when he says the things he says, I think he is very off the cuff. But I think what it is that, like, at least what it seems like to me is that he's just very, like, his specific move is to play to his audience. He's very good at playing to whoever his audience is at that time.
Right.
It seems like his just immediate goal is, like, how can I get these people to cheer for me and whoop for me? Like, he just knows how to play to whatever audience he is.
Love him or hate him, the dude can do it. That is for sure. But anyways, I would say he definitely his entire everything started kind of as a counterculture. But the funny thing is I think that was one type of counterculture movement where, because it wasn't based on civil rights and it was based more on, I think a lot of people, honestly, Jared, were angry at the government. And that's why a lot of people voted Trump in 2016. They really did think he was going to, and I tell you what, he has brought in a lot of change in the government. I'm not saying for better or for worse here, but
well, it's hard to tell because people still support him, and it's like, is it because of the policy, or is it just because you like that this person is essentially like an open racist that just speaks his mind, and you've never really seen anything like that, and you I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's hard. There's no way to know.
Right.
Is essentially what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Because no one's just going to be like, oh no, I just like that he's a racist. That's why I choose him.
I mean, I think there's plenty of white people out there that would say that just using slightly different vocabulary.
Sure,
but,
of course.
Yeah. Anyways,
he's cleaning up the streets from those thugs.
Right. Let's talk more about counterculture, though. And one thing I want to bring up, as we've already mentioned, is music. Obviously, the 60s, there's a lot of music out there that has... Maybe I should have ended with music so we could have gone with the song of the pod, but whatever. Anyways, there is a lot of really good music in the 60s that's very... kind of, well, some of it's very protest songy and kind of folky, but then you also have some rock music that was also very anti-establishment. Sorry, my German cuckoo clock, the untranslatable
in the
owl,
60s,
has made a second appearance, it looks like.
It was also popular to sing about Vietnam too, and protest against Vietnam. And anti-war was very big during that time, the idea of anti-war. And I mean, they were fighting a pretty useless war, what seems like, in hindsight especially. Which, although, I mean, hindsight, it seemed like they were pretty aware of that in the moment too.
Right.
But it seems like a pretty useless war, which is interesting too, because it seems like we're fighting a kind of a useless war right now ourselves.
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem as popular to talk about anti-war these days. That doesn't seem like a big.
I think it depends what kind of music.
Which means it is probably part of counterculture. Right. If I don't know about it,
exactly,
because obviously people talk about it,
right? Well, I think you have to look into more underground forms of music to really like. I mean, Rage Against the Machine. I would say they were. I think their message is still very counterculture, but I think because their music is so fantastic, they've become so famous that I would say. I don't know. Here's a question. Does fame negate counterculture? Like if you become too famous and you become mainstream, but your ideals and your songs or your art is still very counterculture, are you still counterculture, or have you now become the cool crowd, which means you're not counterculture, but you're just culture?
Can you be a counterculture artist that performs in Madison Square Garden? Is
right.
I think yes. I think if you because counterculture doesn't really mean to be honest, it doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people that agree with you. It just means that it's not either popular to be talked about or people aren't educated. I feel like there's so many reasons like why something can be counterculture, not just because what you're saying is so bad, And I think if enough people catch on to someone's message because they're conveying their message so well, if you stick to that message, then I think that's fine. But I think it gets scary because when you're talking counterculture, what's one of the biggest fears as someone that is a counterculture icon?
Probably becoming so famous you're not counterculture anymore, I would think.
Well, what would you call that? There's a word for that.
I have no idea.
Well, your fans say this about you if you start getting
sellout. You're
there you
sellout.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest sort of counterculture, like that's how being called a sellout is how you get pushed out of the counterculture movement. So I think you can make money because you have a large fan base if you're sticking to the same message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think there
agree.
are groups and I think there are artists that do that. Like I know Roger Waters, he's very popular for having strong messaging during and people I think admire it because he does a good job of keeping it very like he keeps it very in his art. And I think that if you can make it artistic, then it can still it can be respected. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I want to talk about some genres of music and some different countries, Jared, where they might have some counterculture. So one of the first ones that I can think of just off the top of my dome is Czech Republic. And a lot of back when it was occupied by the USSR, a lot of basically anything Western was kind of counterculture back then because it was against the governmental norm, But see, that's the weird thing is that we often talk about counterculture as something that's against societal norms, but I think a lot of times counterculture can also be something that society wants or the general populace of society, the general people want it, but the government forbids it for whatever reason, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
For example, like I know punk music, I'll never forget one night I was out with, wasn't one of my students, he was at the school I used to teach at, they also had like a couple of college classes, I forget what like technical grades it would have been, but he invited me out for drinks one night, so I went and I never taught him before, and he was actually the same age as me at the time as well. So, and he was this really, really tall guy who had a blonde mohawk, like bleach blonde mohawk, looked like you could tell he was like a punk rocker kind of dude, right? And so we went out drinking and having a good time, and he was telling me about his father who smuggled in punk records from I don't remember if he said West Berlin or where, but he somehow smuggled in all sorts of records and would play them at this bar. And he went to prison. His father went to prison. I forget how long, but because of he was sharing and so passionate about this punk music. So punk music in the Czech Republic to this day is now it's very, very popular. If I spoke better Czech, I could tell you if it's anti-establishment. But I would imagine, I mean, if it's true punk music, it will be anti-establishment,
Sure, sure.
But if it's more just kind of your fluff punk, like anything, once anything that's counterculture becomes popular enough, you get your kind of pop punk groups or your dare I say even pop metal type of groups or whatever, you know.
Well, that's because then the companies are like, well, this is what people are interested in now, so we can make money
that
off
money,
of it.
right?
Yeah. It really, the companies ruin everything.
I wouldn't say it's a company's job. I think it's money.
Yeah.
Really, it's money.
Yeah,
At
that's
the end of the day, that's all it is money.
Well, I'd say a huge part of counterculture is anti-capitalism too.
Oh, for sure.
Or
government.
I guess anti-government, whatever. Because I say anti-capitalism because that would be what it would be here.
Right.
But I guess if you're
anti-establishment, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. No government. No taxes. No telling you what to do. How you know.
So would you? Oh, interesting. Would you consider like a libertarian counterculture?
Not anymore. I would say maybe years and years ago, but not anymore because I feel like there are a lot of people who are kind of socially liberal, but they're more like fiscally conservative, and they're, you know what I mean? A lot of ways, Jared, I would consider myself more of a libertarian than a straight up Democrat. I'm not a straight up Democrat. I wouldn't say.
Yeah, you always make a point to say that.
Yep, I'm not. I don't
think I am either,
party.
but I definitely would not call myself a libertarian by any means.
Right. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit more about some underground counterculture in music. And I want to talk, so I mentioned the Czech Republic. Now I want to talk about China because I saw a couple, not of these bands, but I saw a couple like punk bands in China, and I could just kind of, and I met a couple kind of punkers at a few places I used to go out in Beijing at. And I don't know, dude, like punks and metalheads in China, they are some of the coolest people ever. I don't know what it is, but just they're awesome.
What is the thing about being in some sort of counterculture in China, for example, is it seems like there's a legit risk, especially musically when you're putting out music.
Yep.
Like that's a legitimate risk you're taking. Because even in the U.S., I mean, yeah, you take risk if you're counterculture, but for the most part, the government's not going to come after you.
Right. What? Well,
I mean.
Well, that
historically speaking,
right. But yeah. So the thing that's so interesting though about in China, I would be willing to argue that I would say hip hop in some ways, for sure, metal and for sure punk are all examples of kind of counterculture in China. Also, there's like artists in China, plenty of artists. Now, what's interesting though is that they have to be really careful. A lot of these artists. Where, you know, they have to be very choosy of their words and what they say and how they say it. But they did the same thing in the Czech Republic, where, you know,
but that's where the good artistry comes out of it, is where you can still tell your message, and when the establishment comes to you and say, "How dare you say this?" and you're like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm talking about cooking a dinner with spoons."
Right.
I don't know. I just made something up,
right.
But you know what I mean.
But I think another reason why in China counterculture is such a fascinating thing to look at is because I think a lot of it is really just. I see a lot of people in China who I wonder how good they could have been, maybe as an artist or a musician or a writer or whatever. But a lot of people don't have that kind of option. Right. And so what counterculture, I think, for a lot of people in China is it's just simply to express yourself. It doesn't always have to have some anti-government, anti-whatever.
So is it? It's hard to even if you're not telling some sort of what the government or whatever would consider an extreme message. It's still hard to just produce music and put it out there.
I mean, you have to be careful. You have to be careful of censorship. You have to be careful, but I think the key with counterculture over there is that, if you're well,
proper counterculture though does have some level of risk to it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting to see counterculture in China these days. Or for example, I don't know if I should even say this on the podcast because I know you still would consider going back, but like even what's going on with like HK and
well, right, yeah,
and China,
well,
like there's a whole.
Believe there are people writing songs, making music, making art about what's happening in Hong Kong right now. for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, but see, that's kind of the place where counterculture grows. And I think that's why a lot of countries, that's how they want to stop it, because they understand that, if counterculture becomes big enough, it can become a part of just the regular culture. And I think counterculture, if you want to control people, and if you want to have them think a certain way, you can't allow people to express themselves freely. It's a very dangerous game.
I think that's also part of the claim of like in the U.S. especially, that it's pretty fair to say that a lot of American pop, like music and artistic culture, has been formed by Black people. They have a lot of roots in a lot of the original forms of music and art and stuff that happens here in the U.S. And I think that some people would attribute that to sort of the ultimate counterculture, escaping slavery or oppression, is in having those extreme forms of quote unquote counterculture, which it is. I mean, it is saying I don't want to, like being against slavery or being against certain forms of segregation or whatever, and that stuff like that is why the music is so long lasting and impactful, and why. And I feel like that's where a lot of that impact on American culture comes from, is that sort of counterculture, like the extreme forms of counterculture.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think the other interesting thing about counterculture is it just has a kind of different vibe, or if it's art, like visual art aesthetic to it, that I think for a lot of people it really catches them. I think of especially in music, you have these diehard metalheads or punkers or whatever, and I think counterculture, if you get involved in counterculture, I feel like in a lot of ways counterculture is not something that it's like I guess you could in theory just kind of like a band and be like, all right, they're okay, but I feel like the people who are into counterculture, they're like, it's all or nothing, basically. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But maybe that's an inaccurate. I don't know if that's an accurate perspective or portrayal.
I don't know if that has to be. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Counterculture has and will always be cool. Do you agree with that statement?
If it is considered counterculture, yeah. If it becomes mainstream culture, I hate to sound like a hipster right now, Jared, but I would say it's. I mean, think about it. If you have, if you have any type of art or music in the beginning where it's like counterculture and it's kind of, I think people like counterculture because, as you said, there is an aspect of risk to it. There is this aspect of. It's just different. You haven't seen it before. You haven't heard it before. It's a new experience, right? For a lot of, at least I'm thinking of music and art. I still remember the first time I heard, some punk groups and metal groups, and I'm not a huge, punk guy or metal. I mean, I listen to, I guess lately a lot of metal, but still, I
think there's also something very attractive about that, like. I'm telling you something you don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you something they won't tell you. Right. I think that's
true. That's a great point.
That's very attractive, and that's where a lot of the like conspiracy theorists come from. Obviously, is like I'm going to get to the bottom of this and figure out what they're not telling you.
Yep.
And I just think that it's always been very cool, and I feel like. I'm just thinking about sort of the stereotypical counterculture person. I imagine someone that's fairly mysterious, someone that doesn't talk a lot, someone that is very like I don't know, but I just feel like it's a very attractive thing, the idea of counterculture, where it's like this person doesn't listen to what everyone tells them, and maybe that's what it is. These people don't follow the rules. They don't listen to what other people tell them.
They make their own rules.
Yeah,
that's what's
very
cool
attractive. Who doesn't like that?
Yeah, for sure.
I play by my own rules.
That's right. Yeah, but I think you mentioned Berlin. I think Berlin is a great example of counterculture. I feel like a lot of different metropolitan places, I mean, I definitely saw my fair share of counterculture in Beijing, and I would be willing to bet there's probably even more instances of counterculture in Shanghai, would be my guess.
Right.
I got a friend who is now in
that.
Shanghai. I'll have to ask her. Although she's not the going to the punk rock bars type, but hey.
Another popular counterculture town, I can think of two off the top of my head.
Okay.
One, San Francisco.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's where the hippies were.
Yeah.
Haight and Ashbury. That was like the intersection.
And two, Seattle.
Yep.
Seattle is known for pumping out a bunch of counterculture musicians. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely got but one of them being Jimi Hendrix, right? Isn't he from Seattle?
Yeah. Very good. I'm impressed. Good work, Jerry.
Yeah.
Doing his homework. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah. So what are some other counterculture? Oh, I'd say Ann Arbor has a counterculture
100%
vibe to it.
Yeah. I would say a lot of when I think of counterculture.
But that's not a big city. I mean, it's a bigger city, but it's not a big city.
I also associate counterculture with graffiti. So like that's why Berlin strikes me as counterculture a lot, because you see all the beautiful graffiti art everywhere. Mm-hmm. But I wonder now if
but you also see it in the fashion too,
right? I wonder though in Berlin if graffiti now has become so mainstream it's not counterculture anymore. You know what I mean?
But I think,
I
understand why you would say that.
Right?
But I think what helps a little bit is there are still areas of Berlin where it's not allowed. I think that helps a little bit. Where it does still feel a little, and I don't want to say naughty because you're not breaking the rules, I guess. But naughty. Also, it feels weird to say that word.
Right. Just say it with a British accent, and you're good.
But I feel like it helps, especially since the area where it's not allowed is obviously like the middle and like the tourist attraction areas. You can't just spray paint willy nilly. So when you're in those more interesting neighborhoods. It helps. I don't know. It adds to the vibe, especially especially if you're going to some club in an abandoned factory or something.
Right.
I don't know. Because it just have like, especially, I don't know. It has this like sort of very like abandoned by the masses vibe and taken over by the youth vibe there.
I just wanted to say, I think a big thing about counterculture is also it tends to be a movement by young people. Exactly.
Yeah.
Ushering in some idea of change and
I don't know if I agree with this, but there are always people that say that like as you get older you turn more conservative, and
might be true.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself,
I
Mr.
am.
Libertarian.
I am, Jared. But yeah, I don't know. It's really cool though just to see the way counterculture has changed cultures and societies. Different things. I mean, I look at a lot of the drug laws around the world, and I think some of that, the countries that have more relaxed drug laws, I think some of that might be due to counterculture in a way.
Yeah. And it is interesting because a city like, especially for tourists like us from the U.S., I feel like a city like Amsterdam, a lot of people from the U.S. or outside of Amsterdam probably go there to smoke weed or something. And I feel like it does have almost like this counterculture sort of mythos to it until you go there and you're like, oh, this is just a normal city.
Yeah, it's weird. You go there and you visit the red light district, and I mean, it's fascinating to see and it's interesting, but like, once you
although I don't think prostitution is counterculture in Europe because it's pretty it's more legalized,
and I mean it's the world's oldest profession. That's what they say. But yeah, I would agree that that you're right. I guess it's more for us as Americans because we're so uptight
it does seem
about
so.
that.
Yeah, we're like, ooh, oh my gosh, we get something that we're not allowed to have, and this would be illegal, but we can just do it freely. Although, granted, that's obviously going away here in the U.S. too, as it slowly becomes legalized. Like I imagine, if you go to a state where it's fully legalized. I guess Michigan happens to be one of those. Now I think about it, it doesn't have that same sort of
stigma.
like people. Yeah, exactly. The stigma goes away as soon as you can you see it at a normal store.
It's kind of like when you're in high school and you want to try something, but then your parents are like, "Oh,
Yes.
You want to drink? Okay, have a glass of wine with dinner tonight or something, and then if your parents do that, then it's automatically almost like, well, this isn't even cool now,
Well, as a kid, I think kids trying stuff like that. It feels like part of the enjoyment is
the risk.
Like the enjoyment is yeah, exactly. It's like
risk.
we're excited to try and alter our state or whatever, but also we're just excited to be sneaking away from our parents.
Right.
Like the sneak factor is almost as exciting and intoxicating as the intoxicant.
But I think that's a big thing about counterculture is that it's kind of this underground. It's this kind of. It is kind of in a way.
You gotta work to find it,
right? And it is. And I think it's like that because you're trying to also add
get away from the man.
Yeah, you got to add that risk to it. I don't know. I think for the most part, counterculture in the U.S. I would say has done a lot of good. But then you also have the crazy religious cults, which I would also say is a part of counterculture, and it's at least worth mentioning. We don't really need to talk too much about it, but. You do.
Do you think like Scientologists are counterculture? That's counterculture.
I think it probably at some point was counterculture. Maybe it still is. I just view it now as another type of organized religion.
But you mean like the extremist Christians that you see like holding up signs about gay people or whatever on the corner?
I mean like people who like move to like the middle of nowhere and build like their own society type of cult.
Oh,
I mean like hardcore cults.
Yeah. Well, that's like an old school counterculture where it's like all right, that usually involves some male leader trying to find a way to have sex with a bunch of women,
right?
And at some point,
they all die somehow.
Yeah, exactly. But they all did it voluntarily,
right? And
I didn't tell them to do it; they just all agreed to at the exact same time.
Or what they'll tell them is well, you're going to Salvation or some BS like that. You're going to go see the Lizard King Zorp. After you drink this magical concoction, which is like, I don't know, lighter fluid and something else,
Well, that is sort of the basis of counterculture, is where it's like, well, we're telling you what the mainstream politics and news and media won't tell you. Like, this is the truth,
right?
And then the cults take it to the extreme where it's like they're frying your head with 5G, so come live off the grid with me in this middle of nowhere in Arizona,
right?
And I'll take care of you,
and we'll drink
give me all of your money,
right.
And I'll take care of all of us with all of your money,
right?
And
sounds like a great investment.
I'm very
Jared.
horny.
We should join one of these.
No, you can't join one. You got to start one for it to be enjoyable. I feel like
probably. Well,
because you got, or else you're just working. Or you're just a slave essentially.
That's true. That is true. But yeah,
but I guess there are even less extreme cults, like a commune, for example.
Right.
Like that doesn't have to be a cult, does it? But that's a group of people living together and subsiding together, and putting their resources together.
Sure. Well, I think that's different. I wouldn't. I think a cult is like a group of people that join for a specific reason, whereas I feel like a collective where you're all living together, a co-op type of thing, is more just. You might be a hippie, and it might be greener in theory, or who knows why. But I just view that a little bit differently. Yeah.
Cult also means some sort of charismatic leader. It has to involve some sort of leader that's like That's like manipulating people.
But I don't
think it's a pretty big
But I don't think if you
aspect of it.
live in a commune. I mean, there could be a leader, I guess, but when I think of a commune, I don't think of like a. I guess in my head, I have a different association. I don't have this like Jesus-like dude standing in front of a tent. You know what I mean? Like
if there's a leader, it's like it's a voted upon leader.
Right. And it's somebody who probably honestly does a lot of the stuff other people don't want to do or is more responsible.
Yeah, it's like they're sitting there
whatever.
figuring out the bills.
Right, exactly.
The
they're
utilities
doing the budgeting.
bill.
Exactly. They got to call whoever to fix the toilet or, yeah.
How do you feel about the term hippie? Because that's such a go-to counterculture word to call someone a hippie.
But I think the word has changed.
It has no meaning anymore.
Exactly. Well, words in general, Jared, have no meaning. Language
I
is
feel like in our
arbitrary.
lifetime, hippie at this point just means someone that, like, I don't know, smokes weed and listens to
Grateful
music
Dead.
that you don't listen to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Grateful
Jam
Dead.
bands, Fish.
Fish, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the term hippie now, I think it doesn't have the same. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think the term hippie now, it just. I think it doesn't have the same. I think It doesn't have the same resonance because I mean, I feel like really if you're really a hippie, I feel like you were alive in the 60s and 70s during that time period when that happened. You know what I mean? Anybody nowadays who says they're a hippie, I think they are just
So you think that term sort of it sort of specifically belongs to an era? It describes a person of a specific era, not just generally a kind of person.
Like a
kind of person from this time.
Like you could say somebody is very like they're very, hippie-esque or
hippie
whatever.
tendencies or
but I think if you call somebody a hippie, like,
that just means they're dirty and they like crystals.
Right, and they have to make sure all their
natural
clothing
soaps.
Exactly. They might be vegan.
Yeah.
The list goes on. But I don't know. I mean, I think hippie has just changed its meaning over time so much. I think for some people, hippie is just somebody who's laid back.
The same thing it's the same thing. But hippie, as a term that representing counterculture, hippie sort of doesn't really mean that anymore. Kind of like just because you're talking about hip hop or just because you're talking about punk doesn't mean you're talking about quote unquote counterculture music. If you're being realistic in 2020, you can say the word hip hop. I mean, I don't know much about punk. I don't know why I use that example, but I imagine you could also say that this is a punk song or this is a hip hop song, but like they're not really like fighting against the machine or fighting against some sort of establishment. That's just a genre they're put into because it sounds like that, which is what the music is based off of.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jared.
Well, let's talk about some Chinese counterculture music because it always seems like such a big risk to be counterculture in a place like China.
Well, so like I said, a lot of it is metal and punk music. Also, if you look at any pictures of a lot of counterculture nowadays, you see a lot of tattoos, a lot of piercings, crazy hairstyles,
which is also losing its sort of badassery. Like tattoos don't really. Like if you had a tattoo in the 60s or 70s,
you were badass.
It probably meant you were either in the war or prison,
right?
Or a sailor. Like that's what. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like it meant you were hard or something. But now it's just like, oh no, I got this flower to represent eternity, to represent the finiteness of life.
Right. Exactly. You're right. It has changed a lot, but a couple, in case you're curious, just a couple bands, for example, one of them is Big Wave, who some people say they kind of sound like a trippier version of the Arctic Monkeys, like a Chinese package of the Arctic Monkeys, which is interesting. But also if you think about counterculture, you can think of in Russia, the group Pussy Riot was a big one. That was a big kind of counterculture thing that
I've heard that name before. I did not know that was a Russian band.
Yep. And I believe one of the singers was I don't remember what happened to him, but I think he was injured, if not murdered or killed, or locked up in prison.
Pussy Riot. I'm going to imagine it's not a he. First of all.
Just Pussy Riot singer, and just see what comes up.
Well, I'm looking at the Wikipedia. I thought you said he. Sorry, that's why I didn't. Pussy Riot is a Russian feminist protest punk rock and performance art group based in Moscow.
Yep.
Founded in August 2011, it has had a variable membership of approximately 11 women, ranging from blah 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 blah. So yeah, it's just a feminist, protest punk group, as I said.
Right. But a big one in China, like I said, is Big Wave. But they also mentioned that, they want to express their feelings. They want to express everything. But you have to be careful because of censorship and stuff.
I wonder if there's is it like a sign of are you like a martyr or something if you're one of these members of these bands that gets arrested? And I wonder how often is that happening?
That's a good question, and I don't have the answer for you, but it's a good question. I will say though, if any of our listeners out there are curious about where to check out some like music like this, I would say definitely check out the Hutongs in Beijing for sure. I spent a lot of time there, and the Hutongs are different than like in Beijing. You have like your really swanky nightclubs that's like your typical, club with a big dance floor and blah, blah, blah. They play top 40 and hip hop and rap and pop and stuff like that. If you're more into the counterculture, look for smaller, and I think this is in general, look for smaller venues. I know like the metal concerts I've gone to that weren't like big ones, they were always in smaller venues as well. And I feel like counterculture venues also have a certain aesthetic, where there's graffiti and stickers and might smell like cigarettes and maybe even cigarettes and piss,
There was like the dive bar aesthetic goes along with these sort of underground places to perform. There was actually a punk, like a punk bar, like they had live music or whatever right across the street from me. I never went into it, but it was one of those places where it looked sort of like a dingy house in the city. And every time you walk past it, if like, first of all, there are always like, a bunch of people smoking out front. But like if you open the door, it was just like a blast of music, and then the door closes, and it's like you almost hear nothing again. Then you open the door, it's just like blah. But yeah, I mean, when I was in Philly, actually, I love to, not that I was doing some sort of counterculture. I was trying to find some sort of counterculture movement. But I feel like you couldn't help but find counterculture leaning music if you're just looking for like live music at bars and stuff, because I used to love to either stumble upon or seek out like like live music bar places.
It's
I
always
like
interesting.
vibe.
Yeah, it's a cool vibe. There's a different just kind of like energy in the air, Yeah, it's
Maybe I like it because it also prevents my need to talk as much.
That's fair.
Or it gives you something to talk about.
Or I think it allows you to avoid talking to other people.
Sure,
I think that's what it is, because we all know how much you love the idea of going into a crowded nightclub and talking to random strangers.
You also how much I love the idea of how much I love breakout rooms.
Right, exactly. But yeah, is there anything? I mean, we could talk for all day and all night about different examples, but I think we've covered a lot of them here, Jared. What do you think?
Yeah, there was one. The only counterculture thing that I kind of want to talk about is like the idea of voting third party.
Oh, yeah.
And how like that's almost is that what we consider a counterculture thing? And if so, I that's something that is definitely not respected. And by the mainstream, and it's just like you're just taking, like, we all know they're not going to win. What's the point? And they're like, well, this is my protest vote, or I'm not going to let you control my vote. Which in theory I understand, but I feel like I'm kind of on the side of like you're wasting your vote. And it's like, well, I'm not going to let this system tell me who to vote for, or give me two options that I don't want, which I 100% get. But I feel like there's also the realistic side of me that's like, yeah, but we also have, but I have no faith in like the system working, so let me just at least have it, improve it as much as I can for myself in the system that I'm living in. I don't know.
Right.
And then also I was just thinking about the idea that like counterculture people, a lot of counterculture is also not being respected during your lifetime, or like being respected in hindsight of what this person did. Like a lot these days, you hear about like people talking about like Martin Luther King, and people always bringing up a Martin Luther King quote, or like a Republican being like, oh, all these he was supposed to be nonviolent, he would not support Black Lives Matter, or whatever ridiculous stuff they say on Fox News. But it's like, yeah, okay, but also he was killed during his movement. So like it's like, it's not like he was universally loved back then. It's just like now that we celebrate him in hindsight, we call him a hero, but like he was very much a counterculture against, I don't know. It's just, I just think it takes, sometimes you do have to be a martyr to be respected too.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Even musicians, like I feel like a lot of musicians, like if you look at Kurt Cobain or Amy Winehouse, for example, I think some benefits that they have of being like, because they're sort of counterculture icons too, is that they they avoided even the opportunity to really go fully mainstream. Like they were sort of both in the beginning of it, but like you sort of. avoid, so they go out as like a even though neither of them are really underground, like they were both very famous, but they almost go down as like some sort of counterculture or like underground legend,
Right. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
like they're one of the good ones, but it's like, yeah, but I wonder if you would still say that about them if they lived out their full life and continued playing, like had a full career, and you saw them get into their I don't know, some old rock band that no one respects anymore, but still goes out and performs. Do you have an
Right.
example of that? I don't know. Like if they were able to get into like their stage of being like Bruce Springsteen when he's 50 or whatever,
Right.
where it's like this guy is just like a McDonald's, Walmart musician at this point.
Yeah, I mean, when you get so big, I guess that's what happens. See, that's the thing, though.
Yeah.
Like you said about selling out, and I think if you do get too big, you're not counterculture anymore. I would say that does have some validity. But before we end today's episode, Jared, let's talk really quickly about our song of the pod today, which is from the Chinese metal group Tang Dynasty. The song is called Pathway. And I really liked this song because it has a lot of different aspects to it. Like, it's not, when you think of, well, first of all, when you think of Chinese metal, I'm not sure what comes to your mind out there, but it's just really cool the way they kind of fuse more kind of traditional sounding instruments and melodies with like metal music,
Yes, the juxtaposition of the two, because they would have like a moment where it wasn't even like they weren't intertwined really, but it would be a moment of calm, and it would be the more traditional sounding, like the more traditional Chinese sound, and he would and the singer would just be singing normally,
Right.
normally whatever that would be, but then it's almost like a bass drop in some sort of techno beat or something, and then it has that hard switch to a more what you would think of as a punk sound, and I like that. I just like that contrast.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I have to say, I really am a big fan of the guitar in this song. It does kind of have some like 80s / early 90s metal vibes, I think, at least from the sound of it when it's like actually, when it's not the more traditional Chinese instruments, but it's really the kind of more fast metal stuff. But it'll definitely it'll get you pumped up and get you. This is not something I would listen to right before bed because you're going to get amped up. At first you'll hear it and you go, "Oh, this is so nice!" Like it's kind of calming.
Yeah.
And then the metal hits and you're just like, "Yeah!" Like not
just in bed with your eyes wide open.
Right.
Oh my god.
Exactly. But yeah, so check that
I
out
like it.
on our YouTube channel, Untranslatable Podcast, at the Song of the Pod playlist. It is called Pathway by the metal group Tang Dynasty. So let us know. I think we've covered everything for counterculture, right, Jared? So to recap,
Yeah, dude.
I guess counterculture is only counterculture unless it gets too big and they sell out. That's, I think, one thing we kind of talked about.
That's the big fear.
Yep.
The sellout.
Yep, don't want to be a sellout. Another thing about counterculture...
But sellout just means making money. And it's weird, too, because there's a weird line where it's like...
Exactly. There's a weird line where it's
you want them to succeed.
Right. There's a balance.
But if
there's a balance. I feel like, but I think the difference between making it at least in the entertainment industry, music industry, art industry, making it is different than selling out. I think selling out means that you basically you get rid of your values, your morals, whatever drives you to create your music or art.
You're no longer yourself.
Right.
You're
just doing it for the money.
Company robot.
Exactly. But I would agree with that. I think counterculture also has to do a lot with freedom of expression, freedom to question and criticize organizations, groups, society as a whole, gender roles, all sorts of different things.
Do you feel like you had a counterculture phase in your life? You had long hair. That's very counterculture.
Yeah, I did have long hair. You should, I'll see if I can find something because you're not on Facebook. I'll find a couple pictures and you can drop them if you want when this episode drops because there are a couple goofy ones I can find. I'm sure. I got one where I have my long hair and I have a camo hat on with an Ozzy T-shirt and I'm playing guitar.
Oh my gosh!
If that's not more counterculture, I guess, then what is?
But you weren't actually, like, you didn't have any strong beliefs that you were fighting against some sort of machine or anything like that. It was just a look that you liked more than anything.
And the style of music I liked too.
Sure.
I mean, for me,
because I feel the same way. I feel like there were moments in my life where, like, obviously I'm a hip hop fan, so I've listened to a lot of music that might be considered quote unquote counterculture, but I've never felt like I had any strong feelings, like any strong sort of, I mean, other than, I don't know, does Black Lives Matter, does that count? That's a strong feeling, it seems like. But anyway, I've never had like any...
Is that counterculture, though? I feel like that's pretty mainstream, isn't it?
You think so?
I would think so.
I don't know.
But we're also young, and I mean, if social
look
media...
who our president is.
Right. Yeah, but...
that would make me believe that it's not mainstream.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Because saying something like that does go against a lot of the political establishment in their mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, it kind of does, because I think a lot of the reform comes from going against what a lot of Republicans believe. So I think there is a level of, but anyway, I don't think I've had any, other than liking a certain look at a certain point of time and maybe enjoying listening to music. I feel like I haven't had any strong enough feelings or convictions or actions that other than what I wear or listen to,
Right. That makes sense.
And so I guess what I'm saying is I've been a poser, but I've never been I've never really been a strong counterculture person.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing,
Maybe that's the second biggest fear. The first biggest fear is being called a sellout. The second is just being called a poser.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
A phony, just pretending to be part of the culture just for the check.
Right.
And I think that's a very real thing that happens, where it's like, is this person a part of the counterculture, or are they're just saying what like they're just saying what they think what their fan base would want to hear.
Exactly. That's very true. That's
always a bummer when you hear from like someone you look up to and they're like, oh, they don't give a shit about us.
Right. Yeah. That is true. That's a sad moment, Jared, for sure. Well, let us know, though, how you enjoy counterculture, what counterculture music and art you like at untranslatablepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram, Untranslatable Podcast, where all sorts of pictures, clips, all sorts of great stuff. Check us out on Twitter, Untranslatable1, the number 1, for all sorts of great retweets. I can't talk tonight, apparently. It's past my bedtime, people. My apologies. And lastly, please, 5-star reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Let us know how we can make this podcast better for you. So as we say here at the Untranslatable Podcast, Dziękujemy, muchas gracias, shusha, and do svidania.
Fight the power.
Don't be a sellout, Jared. Don't be a poser.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't make anywhere close to enough money to be called a sellout.
Not yet. Not yet. But I mean, I keep my eyes out for that Pepsi and that Coke email.
Actually, I take it back. I've never not been a sellout. I've always just worked for big companies.
Right.
I think that's the definition of a sellout.
Maybe. I don't know. Are you compromising your morals and ideals to do so? Only slightly?
Yeah, only a little bit, I guess. I don't know.
And you're only a little sellout, like a quarter sellout. I don't know,
Listen,
though, dude.
you gotta do what you gotta do.
I've kind of indirectly worked for the government, kind of. So I feel like I'm working for the man.
That's true.
That's
true.
Dangerous stuff.
In 20 years, I'm going to tell. Yeah, I had a friend, Chad. He had, by the way, you heard that. He used to work for the Trump administration.
That's what
he was
an
agent.
People?
A Russian agent.
Oh, jeez. You better cut this out, Jared. You better cut this, because I'm recording all this. All right, I'm ending the recording now before
That's hilarious.
You get me incarcerated, Jared.